WWE fans are in shock after breaking news surfaced that Seth Rollins was rushed to the hospital following a suspected drug overdose, and Roman Reigns was seen arriving moments later. In this emotional and intense update, we break down everything we know so far: what happened to Seth Rollins, how Roman Reigns responded, and what this could mean for the future of WWE. Get all the shocking details and real-time reactions from the wrestling world. The California morning was unusually quiet. An eerie kind of stillness that doesn't predict a storm but signals something much heavier. Somewhere within a modern, steel-and-glass mansion nestled in the hills of Encino, the silence was broken by the sharp, panicked scream of a house staff member. A loud thud had echoed down the hallway just moments earlier, followed by a crash. And then, stillness again. But not the kind that brings peace. The kind that whispers, something is terribly wrong. Inside, sprawled across the hardwood floor just outside his private meditation room, lay Seth Rollins. Unmoving. Unconscious. A puddle of vomit stained the floor beside his mouth. His skin was pale, too pale. A half-empty orange bottle of prescription pills rolled across the floor, bouncing off the baseboard with a hollow clink. A faint sound came from his chest, not a breath, but a struggle for one. The housekeeper's voice trembled as she dialed 911. "He's not breathing, it's Seth Rollins. The wrestler, please come fast." Within 6 minutes, a silent ambulance was speeding through the gates of the gated compound, no sirens, no flashing lights, only red emergency blinkers, as if the crisis itself had to be kept secret. Paramedics rushed in with practiced urgency. No publicists. No media. Just the quiet gasp of a personal assistant in the corner, sobbing into her hands. Seth Rollins, WWE's visionary. The architect. The man who carried the weight of wrestling's golden era on his back. Now lying unconscious, his breath shallow, his pulse thready. The medics didn't hesitate. Narcan. 4 lines. Oxygen. Heart monitor. One whispered the words no fan wanted to hear: possible opioid reaction. He's circling the drain. But even before the ambulance pulled out, headed for Cedars-Sinai under coded names and secret entry routes, the news had already traveled, via whispers, back channels, encrypted messages. And in another city, under a different name, a man read that message alone. Roman Reigns. No entourage. No Paul Heyman. No family. Just Roman. The text came from a retired WWE security coordinator, someone who'd worked closely with both men for years. It was blunt. Seth collapsed. Hospital. Bad. There were no emojis. No calls. Just silence. For Roman Reigns, silence spoke louder than any headline. And he didn't need more detail. He was already reaching for his duffel bag. The tribal chief hadn't been seen on WWE television for weeks. Months, in fact. His absence had become the source of speculation. Illness? Burnout? A secret retirement? But none of that mattered now. In that moment, Roman Reigns wasn't the head of the table. He wasn't the locker room leader. He was something else entirely. A brother. The one who used to fight beside Seth Rollins in riot gear as part of the Shield. The man who once bled with him, cried with him, trusted him. The man who once felt betrayed when Seth swung a steel chair into his back. That past didn't matter anymore. Not now. Roman flew commercial, no private jet, no VIP lounge. A hoodie covered his face. Sunglasses shielded his eyes. He moved like a ghost through LAX, brushing past paparazzi who were too busy watching celebrities to notice the greatest WWE champion of the modern era walk right past them. By the time Roman arrived at the hospital, Seth was already sedated. The cocktail of medications in his system was still being analyzed. Reports whispered about prescription painkillers, Vicodin, Xanax, maybe more. A possible mix of alcohol. No one could say for certain whether it was intentional. No one dared ask. Not yet. Security cameras caught Roman stepping into Cedars-Sinai's back entrance, led by a nurse and an off-duty LAPD liaison. His face was unreadable. Shoulders tense. Lips pressed together. A man made of steel, except for the eyes. Those eyes carried history. Guilt. Regret. And something else, terror. Hospital staff cleared a private room. No visitors, the administrator instructed. Not even media. This is high clearance. And in that dimly lit hospital room, with machines humming and 4 bags dripping steadily into the arm of Seth Rollins, Roman sat down. He didn't speak at first. He just looked. At the man lying still in that hospital bed, the man he once called brother. The man who betrayed him. The man who made amends. The man who, despite everything, had always been there, until he wasn't. Roman reached out and touched Seth's wrist, just above the pulse point. It was there, faint but real. That rhythm. That life. He exhaled, barely audible, and whispered, "You stubborn son of a bitch." And then he wept. Not loud. Not with sobs. But with tears that came slowly, silently, like cracks in armor finally giving way. It had been years since he cried. Not even when he announced his leukemia diagnosis. Not even when the bloodline fractured. But now, with no cameras, no audience, no Heyman, he cried. "Why didn't you call me?" he whispered. "Why didn't you say anything?" He looked around the room. A clipboard hung at the edge of the bed, scribbled with vitals and timestamps. Nurses entered and exited every 20 minutes, their eyes avoiding his. None dared interrupt. Roman spoke again, this time to no one. "I was so angry at you. For so long. You left me alone with everything. The company. The expectations. The pressure. And I thought you just didn't care." He leaned in. "But now I see. You were breaking." The door creaked. A nurse peeked in. "He's still stable." "No change," she whispered. Roman nodded. "Let me know when he wakes up." And then the door shut, and the silence returned. Flashbacks began to swim behind Roman's eyes, of locker rooms filled with laughter. Of road trips across Middle America. Of WrestleMania. Of that night in Brooklyn when Seth pinned him, and the world turned on its axis. They had been enemies. Rivals. Champions. Brothers. But now? Now, they were just 2 men. One unconscious. One haunted. Somewhere in the hallway, someone whispered, "Roman hasn't moved for hours." Another replied, "Let him stay." Doctors reviewed toxicology reports behind closed doors. The substance list was long. Painkillers from a recent back injury. Anxiety medication prescribed after a grueling overseas tour. The combination? Deadly. But it was the emotional mix, the guilt, the pressure, the performance mask, that nearly killed him. Roman knew that all too well. He had felt it himself. In hotel rooms after main events. On the edge of hotel balconies, breathing in air so tight it felt like a scream was buried in his lungs. He had felt the loneliness, too. The fake smiles. The fan chants that couldn't fix the ache in your chest when you wake up and don't remember what city you're in. He'd learned to control it. Seth hadn't. As dawn crept over the horizon, and the machines continued their quiet rhythm, Seth stirred. A twitch. Then a groan. Roman leaned forward so fast the chair squeaked. "Seth?" Another groan. A nurse rushed in. "He's coming out of it. Stay close but give him time." Seth's eyes flickered open, glazed, confused, but alert. He saw the silhouette at his bedside. Blinked. Whispered. "Roman?" Roman nodded. "Yeah. It's me, man." Seth's voice cracked like dry paper. "What are you doing here?" Roman leaned in. "You almost died." Silence. Then Seth whispered again, weak but unmistakable. "I didn't mean to, I know," Roman said, his hand gripping Seth's. "I know. No lectures. No anger. Just truth. Brotherhood. And breath." Outside the hospital, the world didn't know what had happened yet. But inside room 4B, history was quietly rewriting itself. This wasn't a wrestling story. This was a survival story. And it had just begun. Roman Reigns sat quietly as Seth Rollins drifted back into a sedated sleep, his breathing slightly more steady than before. The monitors beside him pulsed in a dull green rhythm, echoing like distant drums in Roman's ears. He hadn't let go of Seth's hand. Not once. The tribal chief, once the embodiment of power and control, now looked like a man humbled by time, grief, and the brutal reminder that even gods in the ring can break in the dark. He leaned back in the chair, exhaustion carved into every line of his face. The room's overhead lights flickered gently, as if unsure whether to fully illuminate this moment of reckoning. A nurse passed by again, offering a bottle of water. Roman nodded, barely acknowledging her. He sipped slowly, eyes locked on the man in the bed. Seth's hair was a mess of damp curls, his beard unkempt, and a faint purple bruise peeked out from beneath the edge of his hospital gown. Probably from where the 4 had been inserted hastily. He looked nothing like the Seth Rollins Roman remembered from their last confrontation. And yet, he looked exactly like him. The weight of memory pressed heavy on Roman's chest. They had shared arenas, locker rooms, and history. They had fought side by side and against each other. But nothing they'd ever done in WWE, no title match, no betrayal, no promo, had prepared him for this. The thought that Seth almost didn't wake up, it haunted him. Roman picked up his phone. He hadn't called anyone. Not Paul Heyman. Not Jimmy. Not Jay. Not even his wife. He wasn't ready. Not yet. He needed to sit in the silence and confront the guilt gnawing at his gut. He opened his notes app. Typed something. Deleted it. Typed again. Then stopped. How do you text someone when you nearly lost them forever? How do you explain the apology you never gave, the forgiveness you never voiced? Then, suddenly, his phone vibrated. It was Paul Heyman. "I heard. Are you okay?" Roman didn't respond. Because for the first time in a long time, he didn't know. He stood up. Walked to the window. The sun was rising now, bleeding golden light through the blinds. Outside, a few paparazzi had begun to gather across the street. Someone had leaked the story. He sighed. The clock was ticking. Soon the world would know. Soon, Seth's name would flood headlines, WWE superstar hospitalized. Seth Rollins overdose scare. Roman Reigns at his bedside. And the narrative would begin, twisted, dissected, monetized. But the truth was rawer than any headline. Roman turned back to Seth and whispered to himself, "We never see the fall coming, until we're lying on the floor." He thought back to the last conversation they had on Raw. The tension. The ego. Roman had scoffed when Seth brought up needing a break, a reprieve from the madness. Roman had accused him of weakness. Of ducking the fight. Of not wanting the weight of the company anymore. And Seth hadn't argued. He had just smiled that familiar smile, nodded, and disappeared backstage. Roman now realized that smile was a mask. He should have seen it. The pressure. The painkillers. The mental fatigue. He should have seen it. But he was too busy holding up the bloodline, fighting Solo Sikoa, managing the fallout from the Usos, prepping for SummerSlam, protecting the Empire. To notice that the man who once carried the shield with him was slipping into shadows. Roman clenched his jaw. Not again. He sat down beside Seth again, his voice low, trembling just enough to crack through the silence. I almost lost you. No reply. Roman continued anyway. You don't get to check out like that. Not without saying goodbye. Not after everything. A pause. You want out? Fine. You want peace? I get it. But you don't just go down like that and expect the world to figure it out later. His voice broke. I would have found you, Seth. I would have come. I should have come. Seth stirred again. Just enough to turn his head. His eyes fluttered open, this time longer. Clearer. Roman, he murmured. Roman nodded. You're okay, he said, more to himself than to Seth. You're okay, man. Seth blinked. I was just tired. Roman leaned in. You scared the hell out of me, bro. Seth's voice was barely a breath. I didn't think you'd come, Roman's eyes narrowed. Of course I came. You think I wouldn't? You haven't returned a single message in 6 months. Silence. Roman exhaled, painfully. I know. After WrestleMania. I needed you. Roman shut his eyes. The guilt twisted deeper. I was angry, he said, finally. Not just at you. At everything. At the company. At life. I didn't know how to show up without blowing everything up. Seth looked at him, eyes glassy. I wasn't okay, man. I was drowning. Roman nodded slowly. And I was too proud to see it. They sat in silence for what felt like hours. Then Seth said, so what now? Roman swallowed hard. Looked him dead in the eyes. We get you out of here. We get you healthy. And we figure out what comes next together. Seth blinked. The tear that rolled down his cheek wasn't theatrical. It was the kind of tear that comes after you've been alone for too long. Promise? He asked, voice shaking. Roman reached across the bed. Gripped his hand. I swear it. No more silence. No more fake beef. We figure it out. The machines beeped quietly behind them. The hallway remained still. Outside, the world was ready to consume the story. But inside that hospital room, 2 fractured brothers were rewriting it, one breath at a time. Later that day, Roman stepped out into the hallway, greeted by a swarm of reporters shouting his name. He didn't stop. Didn't speak. Just walked forward, head down, expression unreadable. When asked by a nurse if he needed an escort to the parking garage, he said one thing, no. I'm staying. Back in the room, Seth slept, unaware that Roman had cancelled all his future appearances. That he'd told Triple H, put everything on hold. I'm not wrestling until he walks again. For Roman Reigns, this was no longer about belts, brands, or bloodlines. This was about saving a brother. Because titles fade. Fame fades. But what doesn't fade is the memory of nearly losing someone before you made things right. And Roman wasn't going to let that happen again. By noon, the story had broken wide open. Seth Rollins hospitalized after overdose scare. Roman Reigns cancels WWE return to stay by his side. Shield fractured by addiction and silence? The headlines exploded across wrestling news sites, sports blogs, and mainstream media alike. Paparazzi swarmed the entrance to Cedars-Sinai. Aerial news drones buzzed above. The hospital parking lot turned into a flashpoint of speculation and chaos. But inside room 4B, time slowed. Roman Reigns hadn't left. Not even once. He sat by Seth's bedside as doctors monitored his detox and stabilization. Every test, every scan, every reading, Roman was there, eyes never straying far. Meanwhile, the WWE locker room was imploding. At WWE headquarters in Stamford, the news hit like a nuclear blast. Triple H was the first to react. He'd been awake all night since a brief call from hospital staff. The call had been coded, calm, but the message clear: Seth Rollins. Suspected overdose. Admitted 5:41 a.m. Triple H didn't wait. He cancelled meetings. Called a board session. Issued a gag order to public relations. The directive was simple: no one talks until we know the truth. Backstage at Raw, tensions rose fast. Superstars huddled in silence between rehearsals. Whispers of "Did you hear about Seth?" passed like wildfire. Many had seen the signs: his erratic moods, the long hours in the trainer's room, the cancelled appearances. But no one ever thought it would lead to this. Some blamed the pressure. Others blamed the schedule. One producer muttered, "We push these guys until they crack. Then we act surprised when they do." The Shield's legacy, once unshakable, was now in question. Because this wasn't just a personal crisis. This was a fracture in the spine of WWE. Roman Reigns. Seth Rollins. The two central pillars of the modern era. And now one was broken. The other was breaking. By mid-afternoon, Triple H called Roman directly. The phone buzzed on the nightstand beside Seth's bed. Roman answered quietly, voice gravelly from fatigue. "Yeah." Triple H didn't waste time. "Stay with him. Don't worry about the show." Roman nodded. "I wasn't going to leave." There was silence on the line. Then Hunter said something Roman hadn't expected. "You're not just a champion, man. You're his anchor right now." Roman clenched his jaw. "Then I'm not letting go." Back at the hospital, Megan Moratti, WWE's head of talent wellness, arrived with a private team of trauma therapists and recovery specialists. She didn't knock. She didn't wait for permission. She walked directly into the room, her eyes scanning Seth's vitals. She turned to Roman. "We're going to take care of him. Full wraparound care. Detox, rehab, follow-up." Roman studied her carefully. "Will it be enough?" She didn't lie. "Not if he does it alone." Roman nodded. "He won't." Outside the door, Paul Heyman arrived, but didn't enter. He stood by the hallway window, staring into nothing, arms crossed, silent. Roman eventually stepped out, approached him. They didn't shake hands. No hugs. Just mutual understanding forged in war and weariness. Paul spoke first. "I told you, the burden would break one of you." Roman stared at him. "It almost did. I warned you. When the bloodline began to crack, I said someone would pay the price." Roman stepped forward. "And I'm telling you now, we're not done. Not me. Not him." Heyman looked away, his voice low. "This changes everything." Roman's eyes narrowed. "Maybe it's supposed to." Back in Stamford, the crisis management team assembled to draft a response. They debated optics, timing, message discipline. Should they admit it was an overdose? Should they address mental health? Should they even mention Roman at all? But Triple H silenced the room with one sentence: "This isn't PR. This is family." And so, WWE's official statement, released at 5 p.m., read, WWE superstar Seth Rollins was admitted to a Los Angeles hospital early this morning after a serious medical incident. He is currently stable and under professional care. We ask fans to respect his privacy as he recovers. WWE will provide further updates when appropriate. No spin. No denial. Just enough truth to hold the line. But the fans weren't content with silence. #SethStrong trended worldwide. Clips of the Shield's debut in 2012 resurfaced. Old interviews of Seth praising Roman as "my brother in arms" began circulating. And somewhere in the flood of retweets and TikToks, fans noticed the quiet. Roman hadn't posted. Hadn't spoken. Hadn't issued a video. Because he was still in that room. And he wasn't leaving. That evening, as sunset cast a blood-orange glow across the California skyline, Seth stirred again. More alert now. His voice stronger. Roman helped him sit up, adjusted the pillows, handed him a water cup. Seth looked around, eyes clearer now. How bad is it? Roman sat down beside him. Bad enough. Is it all over the news? Roman didn't answer. That was answer enough. Seth groaned, running a hand through his tangled hair. Damn it. Roman reached into his pocket. Pulled something out. A photo, creased, worn, folded in half. It was from 2014. The three of them. Roman, Seth, and Dean Ambrose. Backstage. Laughing. Sweaty. Holding their fists together in a triple shield salute. I keep it with me, Roman said. Seth looked at it for a long time. Do you ever wonder what happened to us? He asked. Roman nodded. Every day. Seth blinked. I'm scared, man. Roman didn't flinch. I know. Like, what if I can't come back? What if the fans never look at me the same? Roman leaned forward, eyes locked on his brother's. You come back different. Better. Not for them. For you. A pause. A long one. Then Seth asked the question Roman had feared most. Will you still be there when I do? Roman didn't hesitate. I'm not going anywhere. And in that moment, no storyline mattered. No rivalry. No belts. No WrestleMania. Only the bond. The unspoken brotherhood that began with three men in riot gear, and somehow survived betrayal, war, fame, and pain. Roman Reigns wasn't just standing by Seth Rollins. He was saving him. And in doing so, maybe, just maybe, saving himself. The morning after the world learned of Seth Rollins' collapse, the WWE Universe woke up changed. News anchors across the globe reported solemnly on this shocking medical emergency involving one of the company's most iconic superstars. Pundits debated the toll of the industry. Fans mourned the silence that preceded the sirens. And inside Cedars-Sinai, Roman Reigns had barely slept. He stood by the window now, watching traffic crawl beneath the Los Angeles skyline. The weight of the last 48 hours had reshaped him, not physically, but spiritually. He hadn't worn his wedding ring. He hadn't called his children. He hadn't done anything but watch Seth breathe. Because deep down, Roman knew something the rest of the world didn't. This wasn't the first time they almost lost him. Seth had been unraveling for a while. It showed in subtle ways. The missed gym sessions. The far-off look in his eyes after matches. The smiles that didn't reach his face anymore. But no one spoke up, not Roman, not Triple H, not even Becky. Not until now. And now, it was undeniable. Inside room 4B, Seth stirred again. He'd been drifting in and out of lucidity for hours, fragments of sentences, broken thoughts, lingering trauma. The doctors had sedated him lightly through the night, but now they wanted him awake. He needs to engage, the attending physician said. The body's healing. Now it's time for the mind to catch up. Roman stepped in as a nurse adjusted the lighting. The harsh glow was gone. Now it was dim, natural, sunlight peeking through the slits of tightly closed blinds. Seth opened his eyes. Roman gave him a soft nod. Seth blinked. Still here? Roman chuckled under his breath. I told you. I'm not leaving. Seth groaned. Feels like my skull's full of concrete. You scared the hell out of everyone. I know. The silence stretched between them, not awkward, but heavy. Like the quiet after an earthquake when you're waiting to see what's still standing. Seth broke it first. I saw Becky, he said softly. In a dream. I thought she was yelling at me. Roman smirked. She probably will be when she gets here. Seth exhaled sharply, then paused. She's not here yet? Roman shook his head. She's flying in tonight. Told her to wait until the doctors gave the all clear. Good, Seth nodded faintly. I don't want her to see me like this. Roman stepped closer. Then get stronger. For her. For your kid. For yourself. Seth turned away slightly. I don't know if I can. Roman pulled the chair closer. Sat down. Leaned forward. You think I didn't feel the same way? When I got my leukemia diagnosis. I remember waking up in the hospital thinking I'd never step in that ring again. Thinking I was letting everyone down. My family. My fans. Myself. He looked Seth dead in the eyes. But you know what pulled me through? Seth didn't answer. You. Seth blinked. Me? Roman nodded slowly. You visited me. Every week. You brought me stupid comics, bad jokes, those awful protein bars. You reminded me I wasn't alone. So now, I'm reminding you. He reached out, gripped Seth's hand. You're not alone. A tear rolled down Seth's cheek. Roman, no more pretending. No more silence. You get better. Then we talk. We really talk. About the ring. About our demons. About everything we never said. Seth nodded, voice barely audible. Okay. Roman stood up. I'm gonna get the nurse. Let them know you're back. As he opened the door, a familiar face was waiting on the other side. Becky Lynch. Hair tied back, hoodie on, eyes red from crying, but strong. Fierce. The man. Roman stepped aside without a word. Becky rushed in and dropped her bag at the door. She took one look at Seth. Then at Roman. Then she mouthed silently, "Thank you." Roman nodded. He stepped back, out into the hallway, as Becky held her husband's hand, whispering words only they would ever know. In Stamford, meanwhile, plans were already shifting. Triple H had called an emergency talent meeting. Locker room morale was teetering. Rumors of a full-blown wellness review program swirled. Whispers of backstage pressure, toxic touring schedules, and painkiller dependency among top-tier superstars were boiling to the surface. But this wasn't going to be swept under the rug. Not this time. Triple H stood in front of the roster and said it plain, what happened to Seth Rollins should have never gotten this far. And if you're struggling, I don't care who you are, you come to me. No judgment. No politics. Just help. Effective immediately, we're expanding mental health access, adjusting the tour schedules, and assigning peer wellness advocates to every brand. No one applauded. Because this wasn't a performance. It was a reckoning. Backstage agents began reviewing match scripts, cutting unnecessary bumps, prioritizing safety. Writers were told to strip back stress-inducing promo loads on returning talent. Top officials considered pulling the plug on SummerSlam entirely, but Roman made a call. He told them not to. We don't cancel the show. We honor him with it. But the card would change. Because Seth Rollins wasn't going to be on it. Not this year. And Roman Reigns? He wasn't stepping into that ring to dominate. He was stepping into that ring to tell the truth. The next week, Roman Reigns appeared on Raw unannounced. The crowd erupted. Chants of Roman. Roman filled the arena. But there was no pyro. No entrance music. Just Roman Reigns walking slowly down the ramp in jeans and a black t-shirt that read, "Still my brother." He entered the ring. Picked up the mic. And for the first time in over a year, he spoke from the heart. No tribal chief persona. No bravado. Just Joe. The man behind the myth. I'm not here tonight as the head of the table, he began. I'm here as a brother. A friend. A man who came this close to losing someone he loved. The crowd fell silent. This business, it gives us everything. Fame. Glory. Respect. But it also takes. It takes our time. Our sleep. Our sanity. Sometimes, it almost takes our lives. He looked directly into the camera. Seth Rollins is one of the greatest to ever do it. But he's also human. And sometimes, we forget that. He paused. The crowd held its breath. But he's fighting. And he's healing. And he will come back stronger. Then Roman turned to the hard cam. His voice cracking ever so slightly. Seth, if you're watching this right now. I meant what I said. You're still my brother. Always. The arena erupted. Roman dropped the mic, left the ring. No celebration. No angle. Just truth. Just love. Back at Cedars-Sinai, Seth Rollins watched it live from a hospital bed, tears streaming silently down his cheeks as Becky held his hand. He whispered one word. Damn. Becky smiled. Yeah. That's your brother. And for the first time in a long time, Seth didn't feel broken. He felt alive. It had been 5 days since the world learned of Seth Rollins' collapse. 5 days since Roman Reigns had walked into a hospital room and refused to walk back out. 5 days since the WWE Universe paused, collectively stunned, as two titans, who once seemed indestructible, stood on the brink of tragedy and transformation. But inside Cedars-Sinai, healing had begun. Not just of a body, but of a bond. Seth Rollins was now upright, eating small meals, holding conversations, and gradually reclaiming pieces of himself that had been slipping away for far too long. His doctors remained cautious, his nurses protective, but behind their clinical tones was an unmistakable note of awe. He was coming back. And Roman never left. At night, he slept in a recliner beside Seth's bed. During the day, he answered texts from Triple H, declined calls from media outlets, and kept a firm line of silence between Seth and the growing circus outside the hospital. Reporters had begun circling the building like vultures. TMZ had parked a van near the ER entrance. Paparazzi had offered nurses $10,000 for just one photo of Seth inside his room. But there were no leaks. No photos. No betrayals. Just silence and steel. Becky Lynch had taken over many of the updates. She'd shielded Seth from the noise, coordinated with hospital staff, and quietly removed herself from the internet. But even she couldn't avoid what came next. A media firestorm. By the end of the week, headlines had turned vicious. What drove Seth Rollins to the edge? Did WWE ignore the signs? Behind the curtain, the pressure to perform at all costs, talk shows, podcasts, documentaries in the making, all clawing for their angle. Wrestlers who hadn't spoken to Seth in years were suddenly booking interviews. Critics began dissecting WWE's work culture, the ruthless travel schedules, the mental toll of chasing perfection in a body that refuses to rest. But for Roman, none of that mattered. Because when the headlines faded, what remained were the scars. And healing them, that was what mattered now. One afternoon, as Seth rested during a therapy session, Roman stepped into a private hospital courtyard. The sun was soft against the stucco walls, the air thick with the scent of medicinal disinfectant and blooming eucalyptus. He sat alone, until the sound of footsteps broke the silence. It was Triple H. No cameras. No entourage. Just the man who had once handpicked both Roman and Seth to be the faces of the future. They shook hands. No words at first. Then Hunter spoke. He's lucky you were there. Roman shook his head. He's lucky someone found him. Triple H sighed. I replayed it over and over. The signs were there. I just kept hoping it was burnout. That he'd bounce back. Roman's jaw clenched. He didn't bounce. He fell. Triple H nodded slowly. And you caught him. The silence returned. Then Roman asked the question he hadn't dared say out loud. Do you think I failed him? Hunter looked at him long and hard. No, he said simply. You saved him. A long pause. But I think we all failed each other. They sat side by side for several minutes, two titans in their own right, one a kingmaker, the other a king who'd almost lost his brother to shadows. Then Triple H stood. When he's ready, we'll talk next steps. But not until he says so. No pressure. Roman nodded. Good. And then, for the first time in days, Roman smiled. Inside the hospital, Seth was making progress. Small steps. Physical therapy. Mental health sessions. Slowly confronting what had brought him to the edge. One morning, he asked for his phone. Becky hesitated. You sure? He nodded. What he saw shattered him. Hundreds of messages. Thousands of tweets. Fan videos from around the world. Kids holding signs, "Get well, Seth." Old rivals, Drew McIntyre, Kevin Owens, even Cody Rhodes, had posted heartfelt messages. Sami Zayn had sent flowers and a book on meditation. And then, a short, private text from someone unexpected. Dean Ambrose. No social media post. No public grandstanding. Just one sentence. You still have people who love you. Don't forget that. Seth held the phone to his chest and cried. Later that day, he finally asked for a mirror. The reflection wasn't glamorous. Hollow cheeks. Bruised veins. Eyes rimmed with fatigue. But behind them, a flicker of fire. Roman entered quietly. Seth met his eyes. I'm going to fix this, he said. Roman nodded. Not alone. 2 weeks later, Seth Rollins was discharged. No press. No parade. Just Becky, Roman, and a black SUV waiting in the hospital's private lot. But as he stepped outside, shielded in sunglasses and a hoodie, a group of fans spotted him. Just a handful. They didn't scream. They didn't swarm. One young boy, maybe 9 or 10, held up a handmade sign, "You're still my hero." Seth stopped. Pulled down his hood. Looked the boy in the eyes. Then gave him a nod. A small smile. That was all it took. Back in Stamford, WWE issued a follow-up statement. Seth Rollins is officially on medical leave and will be stepping away from in-ring action indefinitely to focus on his recovery. We commend his courage, support his decision, and look forward to welcoming him back when he's ready. Internally, they had already begun restructuring everything. Seth's appearances were scrubbed from upcoming pay-per-views. Merchandise promos shifted. Creative teams paused any feuds or scripts involving his name. But something else began to happen. A movement. Backstage, superstars began talking openly, for the first time in years. About burnout. About exhaustion. About trauma. A quiet culture of secrecy was beginning to break. And at the center of it all were two men, Seth Rollins, healing. And Roman Reigns, standing watch. They weren't just saving each other. They were changing the business. One truth at a time. 32 days had passed since the morning Seth Rollins collapsed. A month of uncertainty. Of pain. Of quiet recovery behind closed doors. He hadn't touched the ring rope since. He hadn't watched footage of his matches. He hadn't put on a wrestling boot. Because right now, it wasn't about performing. It was about surviving. And then, rebuilding. Seth Rollins had checked into a discreet wellness facility tucked deep into the Santa Ynez Mountains in California. A place where no press could enter, no fans could intrude, and no one cared about titles, ratings, or fame. Only the man underneath it all. The real Seth. Not the visionary. Not the architect. Not the Kingslayer. Just Colby. Each day began at 6 a.m. cold air. Group check-ins. Silent walks through pine trails that stretched beyond the eye's reach. Therapy sessions stripped the armor off one layer at a time, layers he had worn since childhood. Layers no one ever told him he could take off. He talked about the pressure. The expectations. The feeling that if he ever slowed down, if he ever faltered, the whole machine would forget him. And he talked about Roman. How he had hated him once. How he had envied his rise. His control. His silence. But how, in the end, it was Roman who sat by his bed when he didn't know if he'd ever wake up again. He spoke of Dean, too. The missing piece. The ghost. The silent one who never called until now, but who had still found the right words. And he spoke about himself. Not the brand. The man. And how, for the first time in years, he wanted to live, not just perform. Back in Stamford, WWE's internal structure was quietly evolving. The entire touring system was being reviewed. New mental health protocols were being drawn up. Anonymous check-ins. Mandatory wellness evaluations. Peer advisors, former superstars turned mental health advocates, were now assigned to every brand. And in the center of the transformation stood Roman Reigns. Not as a character. Not as a wrestler. But as a man who refused to stay silent. It was during an episode of SmackDown, 3 weeks after Seth's discharge, that the world saw what would be remembered as one of the most powerful promos in modern WWE history. Roman Reigns walked out alone. The crowd roared. But this time, he didn't raise a title. He didn't posture. He didn't play the tribal chief. He stood still. In a simple black shirt. Hair tied back. Microphone in hand. And a storm in his eyes. Then, he spoke. This isn't a storyline. This isn't a rivalry. This isn't about belts. This is real. The crowd fell silent. A month ago, I got a call that shook me to my core. A call no brother should ever get. He paused, voice tight. Seth Rollins, one of the greatest we've ever seen, my brother, my family, was found unconscious on the floor of his home. He almost didn't make it. He looked directly into the camera. And we were not ready to lose him. The arena buzzed. No one moved. This industry gives us everything. But it takes, too. It takes our sleep. Our time. Our peace. Sometimes it takes our sense of self. We're told to be warriors. To fight through pain. Smile through suffering. Entertain through exhaustion. But we are not machines. We are men. We are women. We are human beings. A long pause. And we break. Somewhere in the audience, a fan could be heard sobbing. Seth Rollins is alive today because someone found him in time. Because someone finally listened. And because when the world forgot who he was beneath the lights, he chose to come back anyway. So if you're watching this, and you're hurting, and you think you're alone, you're not. I see you. Seth sees you. And when he's ready, he's gonna walk down that ramp again. Not as a character. Not as a champion. But as a survivor. The crowd erupted into applause. Chants of "Thank you, Roman" echoed through the rafters. But Roman wasn't done. And when that day comes, I'll be there. He dropped the mic. And left. No music. No pyro. Just truth. Back at the wellness center, Seth watched it on a tablet Becky had brought him. He didn't say a word. He just stared at the screen, tears dripping silently down his cheeks. Then he whispered, "I'm not ready to go back, but I'm not afraid anymore." Weeks passed. Autumn crept into the air. The whisper started again. Is he coming back? Will he ever wrestle again? What's next for the Shield? Then one day, quietly, without a press release or social media tease, Roman posted a photo. A black and white image. 3 chairs. 3 jackets. 3 cups of coffee on a gym bench. No caption. But fans knew. They knew. Because behind the scenes, something was happening. Roman had called Dean. Seth had agreed to meet them. And for the first time in nearly 4 years, the 3 men who changed WWE forever were sitting in the same room again. No cameras. No script. Just 3 chairs. And the weight of everything unspoken. They talked. Laughed. Cried. And at some point, no one could say when, it stopped being about apologies. And started being about what came next. That winter, WWE released a teaser. A slow-motion video. A dim hallway. Footsteps. Boots. Then 3 shadows walking side by side. No faces. Just a single phrase, the Brotherhood rises.